Well, hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this special broadcast. I am Ridhima Bhatnagar. That one story that we've been tracking very, very closely over the last few weeks, and especially over the last few days, has been the worst humanitarian crisis that's playing out in Afghanistan with the reign of Taliban and the reign of terror actually just increasing with every passing hour. We have with us somebody who will tell us a first hand account of what it was to be covering what's happening in Kabul, how that evacuation took place. And we also want to importantly understand that this narrative, which is being sent out by the Taliban today in press conferences and interviews, why is it so important for them to get their PR right? I have with me Subhajit Roy, who is associate editor at the Indian Express. Subhajit, thank you so much for taking our time and joining us here. It's really good to see you back home safely. How have the last 48 hours really been for you? And then we'll really talk about what happened to the days that led up to the last 48 hours. But have you finally had a sigh of relief that you're back home and you're safe?
As a reporter, you go into a situation and you always want to stay on the story. And
Sure.
that is your basic reporter's instinct, that if there's a story that is live, that is on, you want to be there. But and but when it comes to your personal safety, then that comes, you take that into account as well.
Yeah.
So, and it's a really a very painful call to take, that I have to get out of this place because there's a story is there, but I have to get out because of my personal safety. But
Yeah.
you make a commitment that you will come back to the story when the situation is safer for you to report. So I intend to go back again once the situation stabilizes, normalizes. So this is the reporter's call, or the journalistic call that I took, that
Sure.
for the time being, let me get back, because the
Sure.
situation on the ground was very dynamic, and the Indian embassy was evacuating, and everyone was leaving from the Indian embassy. So I thought, let me take this flight and come back home, and then go back again once the situation becomes better.
Right. So, Vijit, so really talk to us, because as you know, we've spoken to numerous people who are on the ground, and some of them have come back, some of them are still stranded. The situation changed so quickly, so drastically. Nobody had foreseen. I mean, the US's estimate was that Kabul will not go anywhere till at least for the next 6 months. Within week, 7 days, we saw province after province being taken over by the Taliban. For somebody who was on the ground, what really happened? And when did you take that call that I need to be on this C-17, which is going to evacuate people? What were the conversations that you had? And what was that entire evacuation process for you?
So when one thing that struck me at in Kabul was that the streets and the parks. So Kabul is a beautiful city of parks. There are a lot
Yeah.
of parks. It's very green city, and it's a valley. So the parks were all overrun by refugees when I went there, and they've all these women, children that fled from areas where Taliban had already taken control.
Hmm.
So they had all fled for their life and for the safety to Kabul. So that was one thing that struck me the most. Then
Yeah.
I went to the passport office. There were queues of kilometer long queues.
Hmm.
People have been waiting for 7 hours, 8 hours to get a passport, so that they could get out of the country. So there was
Yeah.
panic, there was desperation to get out of that place. And the same scenes you saw when I went to the airport. I saw that there were hundreds and thousands of people at the airport who just didn't have a passport. Some didn't have tickets or a visa, but they had all packed their bags with their children, with
Hmm.
their family members, and just wanted to get on a flight to get out
Yeah.
of Taliban's Afghanistan.
I mean,
So
we
these
saw
are
those
the
visuals where people were
yeah.
literally hanging onto the aircrafts without knowing whether they will even survive, and had no idea whatsoever, but just wanted that exit as far as themselves and their family members are concerned. So, Vijit, I've spoken to a lot of people who've come back, and they've had the same stories of horror. They didn't know what the next day will look for them. But that's one side of what we are seeing. The other is this narrative which is being peddled by the Taliban, which is them coming on news channels. We saw a press conference yesterday. there seems to be a very, very desperate attempt to try and get their PR right. They have been claiming that this is not the Taliban that you saw in the 1990s. It's a very different, Taliban. We will not have any atrocities. But you talk to women, you talk to youngsters, you talk to locals. They say all of this is a farce. We know exactly what will happen. Our future is doomed. Why do you think the narrative for the Taliban is so important this time around? Is it because of the legitimacy, or is it because they know that the global pressure and the global eye is on them, at least for now?
It's a combination of both. It's both to gain global legitimacy, and also they're seeing that the global eyes are on them. But more importantly, Afghanistan of 2021 is a different Afghanistan from Afghanistan of 1996. So Taliban also understands that Taliban of 2021 cannot be the Taliban of 1996. So
what is the difference? What is the difference that you see?
Taliban, Afghanistan has changed in the last 20 years. They actually tried to walk on the path of democracy, and they gave freedoms and rights to people. The women, I met women who would go out to work, would study, were very, very well educated, very well spoken, and girls who had gone to schools in the last 20 years. I met a 31-year-old TV actress who had also acted in these ad films, and she told me that I was 10 when Taliban was there, and 9 I was there. I don't remember anything, but in the last 20 years, I have been grown up to be an independent woman. I cannot again don a burqa and not go to work and not, act in a movie or a film. That life, I cannot go for that. So that told me the story of a independent, progressive, generation, which will doesn't want to live in an era where medieval laws are being imposed on them. So I think if Taliban wants to govern Afghanistan, they will have to take this factor into account. That's possibly the reason why they're making these statements. We have to now see whether they can walk the talk or not.
So, Vachit, I also want to understand a question from you. And this is based on my sense from how much I've covered over the last 1 week, the number of people I've spoken to. Fair to say that there is a story that's playing out in Kabul and a separate story that's playing out in other parts of Afghanistan, because Kabul has the kind of global eye that it has currently.
To an extent, yes, but I didn't travel outside Kabul, so I can't. I am reading the same news reports that you are reading, seeing the same visuals. But right now, Taliban has sort of at least taken under control almost all the provincial capitals, almost all the major provinces. So there are very few pockets that are ungoverned under the rule. So Taliban has the momentum right now. So they know that they are the dominant, and when they entered Kabul, they didn't even face any resistance. It was a bloodless coup that they were able to carry out. They grabbed power with threat of force and not by using force. In Kabul. So on Sunday, they didn't face any resistance. When I went to the green zone, the diplomatic area, in the afternoon, there were no policemen checking me to get into the embassy, or there were policemen have just vanished, had disappeared.
So this is one of the biggest criticism that we've seen even from the locals, that on one hand you're criticizing the United States and the decision that they've taken and the way they've decided to withdraw their troops. What about the Afghan forces on the ground? How did they give up the fight so easily? But Subhajit, what I want to understand from you is, as we were saying, this narrative that is being, spun by the Taliban. Yesterday, when we saw that very detailed press conference, specifically, a lot of questions were asked: what happens to women? Because this really is the biggest concern. Will they go back to the dark ages? Will they go back to 20 years? What happens to their careers and jobs? The statement categorically said that we will not put any, control on them, but they have to work under the Sharia law. Now, if you talk to a lot of women on the ground, a lot of them have come on record and said that they've burnt their education documents. They don't know what their future will be. Because you were there on the ground just till about, a day or two ago, what did you see? What did you sense was the future that looked like as far as the women of Afghanistan are concerned?
Well, people are obviously scared about their future. That, women I spoke to,
Hmm.
they were concerned that they will have to possibly live under that same medieval era, and they
Hmm.
just don't want to go back to that era.
Hmm.
I mean, women after women, most of them were not ready to talk on record for
Hmm.
for fear of retribution. But they all told me that, that we cannot go back to that era. And if like I remember a quote from a guy who spoke to me, again, he didn't want to give out his real name, and I
Okay.
quoted him in my story in the Indian Express, that, uh, people will be alive when Taliban come, but they will be like, dead people, walking like dead people,
Yeah.
no
Hmm.
freedom, no choice,
Hmm.
no rights. So that is the kind of fear or panic that is there on the ground, which you are seeing that is being manifested in people thronging the airport,
Hmm. Hmm.
clinging to the wheels of the aircraft, or
Hmm.
going to the passport office for hours and days
Hmm.
to get a passport. So they are fearing the worst right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's why the Taliban is trying to put out this message that
Hmm.
we have reformed, we have changed, we will
Yeah.
allow women to work, but we will really have to hold them into account for what they actually do on the ground,
Hmm.
not by what they say. Because what they
Absolutely.
do is the most important thing, not their PR blitz, not their press
Hmm.
conference that they're saying. We have to see whether in Kandahar a woman can go to a bank alone,
Absolutely.
whether in Herat a girl can go to school, in Kabul, whether a woman can run a beauty parlor. You know,
Yeah.
all of that we will have to see that, and that step has to come from Taliban
The reason I
demonstrate.
wanted to understand this is, Subhajit, because, on one hand, as I said, these are these press conferences. On the other hand, you've got these striking images coming from salons, especially in Kabul, where you've got the Taliban people actually painting the walls back again because you have pictures of women who are without a hijab. So it's very difficult to understand what really is happening and why are they so, hell-bent with the narrative that they're trying to push. Before I wrap, Subhajit, I also want to understand how the global community is divided as far as what the Taliban is saying and the legitimacy that's been given by certain countries. We already know what China has said. We've already heard what Pakistan has said. Russia somewhat has clarified its position in terms of the legitimacy given to the Taliban. I want to understand what do you think about India? India also has a dilemma. In the past, we've seen, India rejecting the Taliban. Then you had episodes like IC 814, where we saw the hijacking. Cut to 2021. Do you think it's a catch 22 for India today?
Yes, there is a diplomatic dilemma there, and rightly so. India's experiences have been bitter, as you pointed out, the
Hmm.
IC-814 hijack,
Yeah.
or the or several incidents of Indians being kidnapped
Yeah.
for money, for ransom. So there is a concern, but India is also trying to gauge. How Taliban responds to India.
Hmm.
So India's response to Taliban would depend on how Taliban responds to India, and
Hmm.
uh, the Indian establishment is looking very closely on what are their statements, what are the approaches. Because there have been, I mean, obviously contact over the last few
Yeah.
days because of the evacuation process with the new regime,
Hmm.
and that sort of is an indicator of things to come, that there has been. Because if you want, and for Taliban also, this question of legitimacy is a real very very big question.
Yeah.
They want the international legitimacy, they
Hmm.
want a global legitimacy, and do not want to be a global outcast. unlike last time when only, for example, about 3 countries had recognized them. This time they want more countries to recognize them. So that's why they're also trying to sound much more reasonable than what they were 20 years ago, 25 years ago. So you see nuances there in the approach of India as well. And so India is also not condemning everything so far by Taliban. What India's last red line has been that we will not recognize a regime which is grabbed by force. So to that you can say that the Indian government can very well say that this time the Kabul was not captured by force; it was captured by threat of force. So there is a nuance there. So the government may well take the position that yes, they did not grab the force. But these are questions South Bloc, I know, is grappling with, and there is a genuine dilemma. So they will look at what political structures they have, the Taliban concept with, who are the players right now. Are they accommodating women in the political structure? Are they accommodating minorities in the political structure? Are they accommodating other ethnic communities, groups, say Tajiks and Uzbeks, in the setup, in the power structure? What is the role of Abdullah, Hamid Karzai? All these questions,
factors will play into how
will
the
determine how global reaction is and how India will respond.
Absolutely, a lot of complexities for countries to also, because as I said, the situation is very, very fluid and changing by the minute. So Vijit, we have run out of time. Thank you so much for taking our time, giving us a sense of what you saw and what the situation really is. We'll be, of course, keeping a very close eye on all these developments. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.